Welcome back, everyone. Hi, I'm Jennifer Noel Wong. I'm an associate at Co-Architects and also a past chair of the WIA with Ashley Richardson. Thanks. Having organized the conference in a virtual setting the last 2 years, it's really exciting to hear these inspiring stories in person today and feel the energy of the speakers and the room. I'm here to introduce the emerging professional segment of our discussion, which is sponsored by Abramson Architects. Una Ryan is a founding principal of ORA, and joining her on the panel is Mary Casper, Creative Director of Social Studies Projects. The discussion will be moderated by our co-chairs, Kristen and Yuming. Let's start with brief introductions from each of our panelists.
Good morning. As Jen introduced, my name is Mary Casper. I'm so honored to be a voice on this panel this morning. I'm just going to start off with a little introduction about me as a sort of prologue to the practice. I'm a designer and an educator based here in Los Angeles, and I founded a small office here called Social Studies Projects a few years ago. I didn't come to architecture early in my career. I actually studied sociology undergrad. And so as a sociology student, I had the privilege of studying and researching a really amazing community of quilters in Gee's Bend, Alabama. The model of their work as a medium, which was unique piecework produced by individual women and stitched collectively, has really had an influence on the way I conceive of architecture and of cities. Added to this, my sort of own interests in graduate school in architecture shifted to photography. And so the through line of these two interests has really been an attention to subjectivity, which is persistent throughout my work in architectural pedagogy, practice, and now in the work of SSP. I believe architecture has an opportunity to represent, to translate, to engage with the infinitely rich subjectivity of its users. And in a way, we are much like photographers. As the late Susan Sontag noted, our work is not just a record, but an evaluation of the world. So when it came to establish my own practice, social studies projects felt like the best way to describe the kind of work I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, and the impact I wanted it to have. The contemporary creator known as American Artist recently posted this on Instagram, which summed up my ambitions for my firm really perfectly. He writes about history class in elementary school used to be called social studies, and man, I hated that class, memorizing dates colonizers did things, phrased in the most boring possible way. But on the other side of it, now I'm like, damn, social studies is such a beautiful way to phrase it. If only it had been about the social relations of the people and those relations juxtaposed with what everyone in other parts of the world was doing at the same time and why. And if we had been practicing study, as I understand it, a communal and generous form of indebtedness, generous offerings of our lived experiences to one another over an unknown amount of time because it feels good. This really resonated back to me, just this sort of feeling I have about the phrase social studies and why I feel like it's such a powerful way to practice. So to this end, we are deliberately and increasingly multidisciplinary practice. Our work draws inspiration from history across various disciplines, and we really believe in the spirit and the power of true collaboration. Our own Instagram account, started early last year, helped us to codify this way of thinking, placing our own projects in a stream with our teachers, our contemporaries, and our idols. We celebrate our influences and locate our work within the context of broader themes, patterns, and lineages. As a team, we dig into the particularities of each project for inspiration, and we believe that in so doing, we are actually able to achieve more original projects. Our Red Shed project, a pavilion for an electric car garage in Silver Lake, draws on the neighborhood's history of structural expressionism, rendered in our own interpretation of the site's inherent colors. This was a project that was commissioned by a guy named Coco, who owns a series of car garages in Silver Lake, and he wanted us to design a pavilion that could be used by the mechanics of the garage as well as the patrons of the business while they're waiting for their cars to be serviced. And so it was this kind of like collective waiting room space. Our House for Three is an ADU conversion in collaboration with designer Tamar Barnoon, where we worked within an existing garage envelope and we used details, materials, and windows and doors to establish something as far from a garage as we could possibly imagine. We especially paid attention to materiality and to the use of materials like wood and handmade tile to try to give a more elevated experience to the garage and make it feel very distant from the alleyway on which it is actually located. Our Mountaintop House project is an interior renovation of a Mills Act house. In this project, we took cues from the existing prairie-style architecture, which had high and low ceiling datums, and echoed them in our own renovation of a kitchen and a primary bedroom suite to connect back to the original through these sorts of alignments and materials. Our front of house project is a facade facelift that used just a single new window and a new cladding system to underscore the existing house's order and transform it from a hodgepodge into something more singular and representative of the people currently living there. This project actually had literally no interior scope at all. It was just an exterior renovation. And then the last project I wanted to share is our House for Two Writers, which is just at the very end of construction right now. This was a ground-up ADU that used the site's existing setback of the garage, which was on the property line. And the constraint of that mixed with the new setback of the second story, which was set back 5 feet from each property line. That was the driver really for the massing of this project, which is created from 2 volumes offset from one another that are used to house a writing room and a guest house for their visiting family with views to the neighborhood from the new second floor. And I think Una is going to follow me. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Una Ryan, and it's an honor to be here today to introduce our firm and our work to you. I want to thank the Women in Architecture Committee for including me in the mix. It's been really great to meet so many wonderful women over the last month as we've been preparing for this. And we've shared some great stories, and I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversations today. So these words, shifting perspectives, describe my path. And actually, give me 1 second. I'm not on my right window here. There we go. So these words, shifting perspectives, they describe my path as an immigrant. I moved here from Ireland 27 years ago as a woman architect, and as well as how I approach my work. I've taken many shifts in life not knowing what to expect, including this. This is one of them, and ultimately the reason I started my business. I bought this fixer-upper on the east side. This is my home. And after 3 years of the daily commute to the west side, I decided to make a shift in my life. And so rather than just leave one job for another, I decided to take some time for myself and see what would happen. And to buy me time, I took on these 2 projects. The house remodel was a paying job, but the bar was essentially an art project on a shoestring budget to help some friends. And these 2 projects really played a pivotal role in what was ahead for me. 2 projects became 4. Whoops, I've missed one. Oh, I'm missing a slide, so I'll keep going. 2 projects became 4, but by this time I needed help, and I hired my first employee, but I still didn't realize I was running a business. Looking back, I was still trying to buy myself time to find the firm that was a perfect fit for me, not realizing that I might have already found it. But my husband knew. He insisted I was running a business after a couple of years, and he also insisted that I needed to get out of our home and go find a studio. So I took a leap of faith and I committed and became a sole practitioner. Once I committed, it was interesting. I found that things quickly changed, and we started building across residential, commercial, and hospitality sectors, and we were thriving with the diversity and the challenges that came with this work. Our ability to deliver quality work and have happy clients just kept opening more doors for us, and really became the only marketing we did for the first 5 years. So after about 5 years in at this point, we were trucking along, but I had no idea where to go next. So I decided to make my first big investment in the business, and we hired consultants to help figure us out and put us on a new path. They immediately rebranded us from Una Ryan Architects, which is a mouthful, to ORA. And while the name is still really personal to me, ORA to us is about making work that is original, relevant, but most importantly, accessible to everybody. So our work tends to be at the intersection of architecture and interior design. And whether it's a new building or an adaptive reuse, a remodel or an interior space, it's always rooted in concept from form to materiality. We really believe that the big idea must be carried through the big gesture all the way down to the smallest detail, and we sweat those small details. The exploration results in work that is a mix of playful and practical. We try not to take ourselves too seriously. It explores the connections between function, space, light, craft, economy, and longevity. And every project we design is a deeply personal one. It speaks directly to the people that we build it for, but it also speaks to the times that we live in and how we live today. So over the course of 7 years, we've successfully built over 30 projects. We believed in the work, and so, take another leap of faith and you put it out there, and we were really thrilled to see that it resonated with others too. And then the pandemic hit. I'd been really focused on growth before the pandemic because to me, growth equals success. I think that's what we're all sort of trained to think. But the pandemic gave me time alone to think about why I was really doing this for myself. And in 2021, I was encouraged by a former WIA co-chair to submit for the AIA Emerging Practice Award. I'd never have dreamed of doing this without that kind of support, and I'm really grateful for her advice. It was amazing. And in preparing for this award, it forced me to have to zoom back out. I love being down at the 10-foot level, but it made me zoom back out, look at the firm from like the 90-foot level, and that was probably the most valuable thing that I did during the pandemic. So what I realized is that I enjoy being on the front line of every project. I love the collaboration, love the project diversity, and that to do those things, I needed to be small, and that I really actually enjoyed being small. And so by shifting this perspective back to what's important for us as a practice, rather than think success is measured by firm scale or by project size, today for us, success is measured by quality. Quality clients, projects, good teams to work with, a process that allows us enough time to do our work properly, and ultimately quality outcomes. And so despite being small, opportunities to work on larger scale projects are still coming our way. And by returning the focus to what we enjoy doing, what we've also found is that we have more time to mentor the next generation, engage with our community doing things like this, and take on some passion projects. And we're stepping up and realizing that this level of commitment is really difficult to pull off at a small firm, but we're determined to make it happen. And so looking back, I made this diagram last week because I roll on tracing paper and pens. I was going to make it look good, but then I figured it was good enough like this. So this diagram shows the evolution of the practice and how, taking a chance, having these two small projects, one of which was pro bono, has led to meeting amazing people who turned into wonderful clients, gives great opportunities in a wide variety of project types and scales. And so during this evolution, what I've learned personally is that by not being afraid to shift or even combine perspectives, to think or to do something differently, has ultimately led to better outcomes for myself, for the practice, for our work, and for our clients. Thank you.
Hello. Oh, they're already turned on. Are they on? Thank you, Mary and Una, very much for those lovely presentations. For this Q&A, we will have audience questions. We are running late, so maybe just like 2. But if you if you like to line up, I guess first 2 gets it. So start running. But first question is to Yumi.
All right, so I get to ask the first question. I'm so glad to see you guys here on stage in person. So I'll ask the first question. I know this is an emerging practice panel, but I wanted to ask you guys, do you see yourself as emerging? And then also on the flip side of that, what does established look like to you? So maybe...
I always think, I mean, I'm 53 years old, and I've been doing architecture since for 27 years now, and so to be emerging when I'm midlife or slightly past midlife is something that always kind of makes me smile because I've got wrinkles, and I always think of emerging as somebody that's younger than me, and so. But what's interesting is as I work through stuff, it's sort of like architecture is a game of patience. It's a slow roll. You've got to be committed to it for the long haul, and that it does take time to figure out where your footing is in the practice, what you enjoy doing, and what it means to you to be able to then understand how you fit into it and where you want to take that. What I'm considering as the second half of my career. So I am. I'm emerging, I guess. It took me a while to get here.
I would say that if Una's emerging, I'm certainly emerging. I certainly feel as though we're emerging. I think we've just started to see some of our very first projects finish, which is such a steep learning curve in so many ways, but also really satisfying. And I think, when I think of 30 projects being built, that to me is what success looks like. I look forward to that moment. I think another thing, and we've had some conversations before today about this, and I think it's such an interesting question, because certainly, every day in and out, I do feel as though we are, successful at what we're doing. I think we're doing good work, and I think we are enjoying the process of doing it. I have a small team that works with me. I do think that for me, the measure of success will be a time when I feel more confident about having set a vision and achieved it. And I feel like right now we're a lot more vision than we are implementation, let's say, or completion. So for me, that's something I look forward to, and I think watching Una's presentation today and just even hearing, I have so much admiration for where you are. I hope that I can, achieve half of what you've done by the time I'm 53. I have a little time to go, but.
Well, in lieu of any sprinters to the microphone, I get to ask my question. So the audience wasn't privy to our pre-discussions, which I found inspiring and amazing. I was wondering if you could answer this question. What was a recent aha moment? We talked a lot about the series of aha moments to sort of get you and keep you moving on. What was a recent sort of, wow, I didn't know that's how it could be or should be, or maybe I'll make it different?
I think I spoke to it a little in the presentation, but I really, 2 years ago, if you'd asked me where we needed to be, I thought we needed to be a firm of 15 people, that the projects needed to be big, and I really was measuring my success and sort of our firm against something that just felt like it was so far away. And I think taking a step back to look at what I really like doing and making it be more about me, because after all, I did it because I wanted to change. I started the firm because I wanted it to be more of a personal endeavor. And I think by sort of shifting back and kind of making it be more about me and then realizing what I wanted was my aha moment. And I think once we did that and we actually started saying it out loud to people, because I talked to staff about it, and because it was important to get buy-in to this as a concept, because it was a shift in the business plan. We threw out the business plan mid-year and started again once I had this aha moment. And so I think it became something that liberated us and really has allowed us to come out and engage in the community and do other things that I would have never imagined we would be doing. So that, I think my biggest aha moment was that. It was the jumping back.
I honestly am I've been afraid of this question because I don't know that I have that many aha moments. I'm naturally not someone who thinks that's the solution, and like instinctively. I'm a Libra. My birthday's next week, so I
Happy early birthday.
I naturally weigh things a lot. I go back and forth a lot. I like to look at multiple options and then kind of choose. My team knows this. Like we iterate a lot and we mock things up a lot. I think that if anything, an aha moment that I've had is. I've been working this year with a business, I took a business class this spring. I think through that class, I feel like I can't claim this aha because it's really my business teacher's aha, and she's brilliant. But her aha is that you can't brand yourself or kind of put yourself out there until you really know kind of what you're all about. And that was something that I always thought, like I saw a lot of other people out there who were great at social media and who were great at promoting themselves, and they were getting lots of projects, and I had some sort of jealousy about that. And then I realized, like, well, I don't even know what I'm going for yet. So the projects we take, I think, are very reflective of kind of where we are in practice. They started with referrals, they grew to word of mouth, and in the last year, just with our very first piece of press that we got at the start of the year, we've started to attract strangers to inquiring about jobs, and that has positioned us differently, I think, to think about how we tell that story back out into the world. And I think we've gotten a lot more clarity this year about that, because we've felt a little bit more power maybe about what we're doing and what we're after. But I think just really kind of like sort of, instead of being so focused on what we were projecting out into the world, really kind of like looking internally and developing more systems and really getting serious about the business side of things, which is something, Una, you said about your husband pointing out to you that you definitely had a business. Like, I think my partner would say the same thing. And yet, like, I don't have an office yet. Like, we still all work remotely. But I think to get the office, I've said, well, before we have an office, I should have a business plan, probably. And maybe I think that's true.
I feel like everything you're saying was like where I was at, where you're at. It just, when you start from zero and you may not even realize where you're headed or what you're up to, where you're going. You're kind of trying to define the path as you take it based on the opportunities that come your way. And so I think, it slowly unfolds the longer you're around. So your office will come.
I wanted to ask about that. What are some of the, as you're talking about building your business, what are some of the steps that you had to take to shift in terms of outreach and networking? And how do you create that for yourselves?
Oh my God, if there's people who know me well in the audience, they will know that I will avoid networking like the plague. Like, for me to be sitting here doing this today is a serious step up for me. As I said in the presentation, I am a 10-foot level person. I will hide behind the desk all day long. Give me a sketch pad and let me draw details 12 hours a day.
Yes.
So I think, the business development person that we brought in kind of she makes me do it now. She won't take no for an answer. She's awesome, and she pushes me out the door. And you know what I've learned is it's great to have somebody behind you who believes in you and who says that you can do it, makes you go out into the world. And the people that I've met once I've gone out into the world and networked, and the connections that I've made and the stories that I've heard, I think have made us a richer firm, because you bring things back into the office and you learn so much from talking to people. And so getting out there is really important. I feel like if my 2-year-old firm version had realized that, we might be in a different place today. Because like I was in business for 7 or 8 years before I realized that.
You don't know what you'll see when you lift your head up
Yeah.
and you look out,
Exactly.
look out your window. Yeah.
I guess I would say that the networking for me has had a different role, because some of my early projects came through referrals, and I've had great relationships with contractors and with some of my consultants from previous jobs. We've had a good stream of projects coming in. It was just me, going, like, this year is when I realized that those weren't always the best projects, that I needed to be getting other kinds of projects too. But I would say that early on, I was really fortunate. I had this amazing friend who I worked with at my first office here in LA, and she and I kind of started taking on projects on our own at the same time. And we knew that we weren't the same. We knew that we shouldn't start an office together. But we had such respect and love for one another that we were extremely collaborative. Like everything that you would share with someone in an office, like we did. So we would share references for contract language, and we would share, what kind of roofing you were using on this project, or how did you do this detail, or how did you file this thing with the city of Santa Monica. And we were just mutual resources. She dragged me to networking stuff, and it was all architecture.
We have to get a dragger. Is that
What did you say?
we have to get a dragger?
Yes, you got to get a dragger. You need a dragger friend.
Yes, all right.
Who's going to
pusher.
take you to the awkward
pusher.
mixer so that you can meet, an amazing landscape designer. Like, then I found my person who I always called for landscaping, or, a great, there was a contractor who then I met through that same circle, and then other people in larger offices who also became sort of colleagues. I think when you're practicing in a small office, it's very lonely in the beginning. Una and I have talked about this, and you really need friends in other firms. And I think that's something I didn't know until I was doing it, because you think about, I should know all the answers, I should have all the resources. Like, if I'm doing this as my business, like, I need to know it all. And I really think that puts you at a disadvantage, because you're up against firms with hundreds of people who have this huge bank of knowledge internally. I'm not competing against some of the big offices represented here today for projects. Like, I'm doing little garage conversions. So it's just to remember. I think networking for me has been much more about architectural community in a way than it has about project acquisition. But I think Una and I, both ways I think are important.
So unfortunately, we're out of time. Right as it was getting good.
That
But
was quick.
as a teaser, Una is part of the afternoon workshop, Taking the Leap, How to Be a Sole Business Owner. And from the bottom of my heart, I just want to thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
you.
Guys. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So joining me on stage, or shortly will be, is our co-moderator, Monica Rodriguez, Senior Associate at KFA Architecture and incoming WI Chair for 2023.
Everybody. Thank you, everybody.
We're very excited to feature two women who contributed to the 2019 effort to unionize at Shop Architects. In a December 2021 New York Times article, Danielle Tellez noted, "We're very innovative in a lot of our office work. This unionization effort feels like an extension of our ambition to lead the industry, to innovate in the industry, but for our professional standards." Danielle is a designer at Y Architects. She has 7.5 years of professional experience in the field of architecture after graduating from the University of Michigan. She also served as the president of Women in Architecture during her undergraduate education at the University of Illinois.
Also joining us is Jennifer Cicada. Besides being one of the leaders of the shop unionizing effort, Jay Cicada, a registered architect with over 10 years of experience, was key in the unionizing efforts of the first unionized private sector architecture in the U.S. since the 1930s, Bernheimer Architecture, where Jay is a project architect working on affordable housing projects. Yes. Jay attended both undergrad and grad school at UC Berkeley. Yes. And has worked at various award-winning firms in San Francisco, Miami, and New York, including Shop Architects. She's a mother of an 18-month-old baby boy, congratulations, and stepmom to an 8-year-old cat. I love it. Welcome, Jay and Danielle. Danielle, will you introduce yourself a bit more to the group?
Yeah, of course. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's so exciting to be here for this panel. Jay and I thought it would be good to introduce ourselves by giving you an idea of who we are and how we became involved in this. So I started out not really knowing much about architecture or design before going into school for it. I kind of just heard that would be something that I might be good at. So I went to school and fell in love with it immediately, but quickly recognized all the troubles that we have in schools with late nights, weekends, and that was expected as a part of the culture. Something that my friends and family didn't really always understand. Working over holidays, etc. I realized that every opportunity was related to extra working in the university or working on competitions through connections or the ability to afford low-paid internships, the ability to travel or study abroad. And then I left grad school. As I left grad school, I had about $100,000 of student loan debt. And my first few jobs that were offered out of grad school were an $1,000 monthly stipend internship, $45,000 salary. I did contracted work for a while with no benefits. And that's after grad school. So I just feel that's a common story, I think, for a lot of people. And then in the field of architecture, we have to pay $235 for an exam, for every exam. Even if you don't pass the exam, you have to pay for all 6 exams to pass. And I was told recently by a recruiter, as I was getting this new job that I now have, that I wasn't valued more for not having a license. I wasn't able to be valued higher. But then I asked how much more I would make if I were to become licensed at this job or at another job, and he said that it's typically about a $1,000 raise, which I was like, that just doesn't add up. And a friend of mine that was working at previous office with me was making around $5,000 less, and he was licensed. So it really doesn't make sense. The license doesn't seem to have a ton of value, and our profession doesn't seem to have a ton of value. And I also realized too that the dream of that they feed you of wanting to start your own firm in school is also really difficult to achieve. A lot of people have to support themselves for a while. They have to be able to take on a lot of debt or take on pro bono work. And without that sort of wealth or that sort of ability, it's hard to really do anything like that in the profession either. And I just was always confused about why such a highly educated and skilled industry would be so undervalued and why I couldn't find a way to control my own time better. And the culture of passion and overworking is so embedded so deeply in the way that we work that we give away our time away for free and always need to feel super competitive in our jobs and efficient every second in order to keep our jobs. And I think that that level of competition also really got to me. And so I think just generally, it's unsustainable to take on competition work for free, to do these fast-tracked schedules, for firms to undercut their fees, and all of the whole process of it seems very unsustainable. So it's no surprise to me when people eventually decide to leave the profession. And all of this kind of impacts on a personal level my ability to have like more of a life outside of work or build any sort of wealth long term. And on a grander scale, I think it's what contributes to larger industry problems of inequity for the very same reasons.
Thanks, Danielle. Jay, could you also introduce yourself a little bit more?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you great.
Is my face big enough? This is my fourth. Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me here and having us here to talk about something that's so close to home now and something that we're both super passionate about. So yeah, I'm gonna go way back to give you a bit of a background story on how I got here today. So I was 7 years old when I decided I was going to be an architect. I would say that my dad and the house I grew up in were behind the early love and commitment I had for the profession. So the house I grew up in was always under construction. I was often my dad's little helper, mixing concrete, laying CME blocks, all this possible because it's in Brazil. But design-wise, my house also had rooms without any daylight, a second floor that was uninhabitable, a hodgepodge of tile patterns on walls and floors. I'd often daydream about becoming an architect so I could just basically renovate that house. So that love for architecture stemming from such a young age has led me to years later now, in most of my professional life, internalize the culture of exploitation that Danielle was kind of brushing up against or brushing over, which is so pervasive in our profession. Being overworked and burnt out is the norm. Working overtime without pay is the norm. Being told that there are no alternatives to layoffs, I've been laid off 3 times, is the norm. Family planning usually gets postponed or pushed to the side, not my choice. I mean, really, how could I care for children when I'm being overworked or have so little free time? How can I even afford to have a family when my salary could potentially not match up to the expenses of having children? Especially when I'm still in over my head in debt with educational loans, just like Danielle. And I think that's a shared story among many of us, especially women, as we are here today. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not all negative. I mean, I feel proud of all the work that I've put towards my career and my professional achievements. You know, I've graduated from a top architecture program. I've worked on amazing projects around the world. I've won fellowships and have gotten awards. And yet, despite this deep love and commitment for the profession, I felt a sense of dissatisfaction. At first, I thought that dissatisfaction stemmed from the disconnect between the profession and social problems, hence my work with Architecture for Humanity for many years, and with projects geared towards communities who are usually overlooked and underserved by our profession. But more recently, though, I finally came to the realization that my dissatisfaction was related to the alienation I felt within the profession itself. What I had been feeling was a disconnect from the product of my labor. In other words, there's a strong correlation between power and satisfaction, and powerlessness was coming from a feeling that I had little to no say in how I produce my work. And here I'm not talking about what goes in the design or drawing or creative freedom, because I've been lucky enough to have had creative freedom. Creative freedom isn't freedom if you have no control over the work day or its remuneration. Freedom is having total control over one's life. Once I learned about unionizing, I had a glimpse to a world where I had some control. Not 100% control, but I had some control over my work and how my work is done, and consequently, how I live with life. So I'm not claiming that unionization solves alienation, but it does put pressure on the system that creates it. So we can actually have more of an equal distribution of control over how our work is produced. So coming to more of the present now, the night following the voluntary recognition of our union from Andy Bernheimer, I slept like a baby. Not the crying type of baby, like actually quiet, deep sleep baby. I felt a deep sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I could no longer be fired without a just cause. I was about to embark on a journey where my voice and the voice of my coworkers truly, truly matter. And I've gained some control over my life. And that's what allowed me to sleep very soundly that night. And this is starting to feel like real freedom.
Well, thank you both for being with us this morning. Thank you for those introductions. We're going to just dive right in and dig a little deeper with some into AWU with some questions.
So in your introductions, you didn't get too much into the unionization efforts in SHOP. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit of that, and also how it sort of evolved from a question of equity within the profession.
Yeah, maybe I can get started on that, and Danielle, please jump in whenever. So, I mean, with my own experience, like I first heard of unionizing as a possibility in our profession through my involvement with the architecture lobby. So this is before any of our conversations at SHOP started. But hearing others at the architecture lobby meetings talk about it still felt like a total far-fetched idea. But then the Black Lives Matter summer happened, in 2020, after the George Floyd assassination. And as a caveat, I'm assuming most people know what the architecture lobby is, but just in case, the architecture lobby is an advocacy nonprofit organization run by volunteers with the goal of advocating for fair labor practices within our field. So in that case, a few of us at SHOP started getting together during that summer on a nearly weekly basis to just talk about what we could do about issues related to justice, diversity, equity, inclusion in the office and in our profession. And a lot of what we pitched to management at that time was just falling on deaf ears. There were a few isolated initiatives that we started, sporadically. But what we wanted to do was hopefully have the office sort of turn those initiatives into something that's office-wide, where we could all kind of collectively share our experiences and kind of learn from them. But that wasn't happening. So at the end of that summer, after a couple of DEI-related workshops and a few office-wide town halls, many of us completely felt like we had no say into anything that potentially would change our office or improve the office and improve its diversity within the office. So if we couldn't change something at the office level, how could we feel like we had any power to change the profession as a whole? Because we saw all the issues we were seeing at the office were also very much present in the office or in the field. And then layoffs happened right after that summer. So that was a pivotal moment where we felt even more powerless. And it caught us by surprise. Then the word union popped up in conversations again, and that's when a few of us, or a couple of us actually, decided to that was the right thing to do, at least to consider. So we started meeting with, we first had an initial conversation with a staff organizer from the Machinists Union, and then we kept meeting with him ever since that October on a weekly basis. Soon we formed a core group that would be the individuals spearheading sort of individual conversations with each and every one of our 130 coworkers at SHOP to engage the interest of unionizing the office. So, and then I just wanted to say that at the same time we were, trying to see interest, we also wanted to kind of create, we had to have sort of a name for our campaign, especially when things would kind of leak out to the public. So that's when we started, with the name of Architectural Workers United. And we wanted the name to be encompassing of all workers within the architecture field. So that would include, designers, architects, model makers, people who do visualization, interior designers, landscape architects, planners, administrative and support staff. So that's why we chose that name, Architectural Workers. And although the name is meant to be inclusive, we do not, like firm owners do not fall under the category of architectural worker.
And also, I think, the lobby had done a lot of research on different types of unions, and they were the ones that kind of introduced us to the Machinists Union and to David. And also, we spent about 6 months just as a group of us learning about what unions were, understanding how this could apply to architecture, the history of it, the risks involved, developing this into presentations to share with others and gather resources to share with others, and also creating, like Jay said, the brand and like the graphics and the templates. And ultimately, after all that time, we decided together as a group that this was truly a way that we felt we could make real change within our own office, but also within the industry for workers and have real power. The power that exists when you can sit at a table with your employer and agree to policies or around hours, wages, and working conditions, and make sense from the worker's perspective, and not solely the perspective of the employer or the perspective of the client or et cetera, but that it comes from the ground up. And then for the next year, we started having conversations with people in the office, like Jay said, understanding if others wanted this to happen and what others were looking for to change, because you need to understand a multitude of perspectives, from the youngest person in your office to the most senior person in your office, from different backgrounds, from different, for diversity purposes, and then also like from different economic backgrounds. And so we started having a lot of conversations, understanding what people might be skeptical about, or, if people were interested in this idea. And then as we kept going, we just built our argument and understood our goals further and understood what this could do in the industry and what this could do, how we could maybe even work politically. And so eventually we were able to gather a solid majority. We didn't want to move forward because you can file with the NLRB or the National Labor Relations Board with only 30% of your employees in support, which involves you signing a card and submitting it to the union that you want to affiliate with, and then that union will share those cards, the numbers of those cards, with the National Labor Relations Board. And so we wanted to make sure that we had at least like 60 to 65% of the employees in our office in support before we went forward. And so we didn't go for it until we had that. And then we filed, and it became clear after we filed, we were very excited to do that, and that was kind of the moment where, we experienced all of this attention, and we had our social media flooded, and it was really exciting. And then, obviously, we came back to work, and it became very clear to us that our principals and associate principals weren't on board. They expressed many times that they did not want a union. They did a lot of things to try to change people's minds and prevent the union from happening, including intimidating us. And we had already lost a decent amount of organizers, including Jay, through layoffs and people leaving the office, and not many people were willing to be outspoken in their support. So it was really just our small group that was trying to speak our opinions against leadership. And so I think it does take a lot of, it's hard for people to want to stand up against that. So as you know, eventually our group decided not to continue with the campaign, but in our office, but to obviously continue working with anyone else that's interested in this idea.
That's a lot. Thank you so much. That's actually very interesting that I'm realizing this is hardly enough time for you guys to really be able, I mean, we can have a whole conference just about this topic. But what I want to ask is now the future, right? So where are we now and what are the next steps? As the career, as a profession.
Well, I think, let's see. Maybe we can talk about, the now, in the future. I mean, right now it's a really exciting moment because we've just established our first union in the private sector. So this is the first thing yes, this is there. Yeah, this is a huge milestone. It's a huge stepping stone too, because we are not going to stop here. And the idea is that we're not going to stop at one contract, right? Like the ability to unionize in the U.S. has to happen on a workplace basis. So we can have a contract at this office, but if I choose to leave this workplace, I will no longer be covered or protected by the union. So the goal would be to have density, especially in New York City, where there are so many architecture firms. We're trying to push that so that we not only can improve each other's contracts that we're bargaining for with our bosses, but we can also start having sway or more of a voice on the political sphere as well, and impacting legislation that also impacts not only how we work, as individual workers, but also how contracts are being written and how companies get contracts, let's say on the public sphere. Is there a way for public contracts to be given to preferably to firms that are already unionized, so on and so forth. So there's a lot that we can accomplish with this one milestone being met, and there's a lot to be excited about in the future. And just one thing I wanted to say too is that all of Danielle was talking about that she's been through, and a lot of our coworkers have gone through. I kind of, in a way, got lucky by being laid off and not being there for the portion of the campaign that was a bit more challenging. But I just wanted to say that us, unionizing in a very conflict-free and non-adversarial and a very unity sort of nature with our boss, hopefully changes the conversation to a much more positive one and brings a positive light to the efforts of unionizing in other firms as well. And so that people aren't afraid for speaking up, that there are things that they feel could be improved in their workplace, and bargaining a contract could actually improve things, and just being able to voice that freely and without fear, I think is huge, and that's the hope that we're hoping the shift continues, and the conversation continues in a positive way.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I do want to give you, if anyone would like to learn more about you, Jay and Danielle, and AWU, how can they find out more?
They can definitely, I mean, you can go to our website, you can reach out to us through email. The steps to kind of unionizing are on our website, and also, like, David, Andrew, people at Architectural Workers United are available to talk to. So if you're interested, we can definitely share more.
Thank you so much for your time. I know that was a little abridged than we had planned, but we're running late over here. If everyone could please give a round of applause to Danielle and Jay. Thanks. Thank you both so much.
Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce Barbara Boza as our final guest speaker this morning. Barbara Boza is president of Walt Disney Imagineering, where she heads the global creative design and development teams behind Disney's theme parks, attractions, resort hotels, cruise ships, and retail dining and entertainment centers. That's a mouthful. A fellow of the American Institute of Architects, Barbara was the 2019 AIA Los Angeles president. She is on the board of directors of Imagine LA, a leading not-for-profit, which is dedicated to ending the cycle of family homelessness and poverty. And she's a member of the National Organization of Minority Architects and the Women Presidents Organization. Barbara previously served as co-managing director and principal of Gensler Los Angeles, and she holds a Bachelor of Architecture degree from Cal Poly Pomona, and studied in the graduate diploma program at the Architectural Association in London. Everyone, please help me welcome Barbara Boza.
Wow, thank you so much. It is so wonderful to be here. I remember the very first AIA Los Angeles Powerful Conference, and I think I've made some of my absolute best friends, or were competitors during the day and friends at night, through the Powerful Conference. So just a great way, you know, women coming together. Oh, yeah. And what was so important was, what I found was, it was, you know, women coming together, women in architecture in multiple design fields, but what we always looked at was anything that was above any one of us individually, but how can we continue to elevate the profession? So it's just been very inspiring to hear some of the presentations so far. And again, you know, we've definitely have a lot of work to do, as we've heard, in terms of really improving the culture of the profession. But you know, I'm very grateful for all the opportunities I've had. As maybe many of you know, I was with Gensler probably the last time I was at a Powerful Conference, but in June of 2020, I joined Walt Disney Imagineering, and I'm president right now. And so if you can look back to what life was like June of 2020, at least in our world at Disney, every theme park was probably, for the most part, closed. Resorts, the cruise ships, everything that Kristen listed. I don't think we were shooting movies at the time, sports. And so a lot of people said, so what are you trying to do here? And I said, well, you know, if there's a time to really start to look at how you can look at the future, I was very excited to have that opportunity to join Disney, and to really, you know, when you look at this idea about storytelling and really trying to reach families, and I really do believe it's the stories you tell and those behind those stories really starts to make an impression early on with children, with families, and really starts to shape everyone. So just before I joined, a couple of the parks open. They've kind of opened, closed, but we're in good shape. As a matter of fact, I was literally in Tokyo a week ago, and it was the first time I actually, surprisingly, after 2.5 years, met many of the Imagineers that I work with in person. So like many of you, right, we've been working remote on Zoom, trying to stay connected, and it really shifted even how we work in terms of, you know, maybe you're used to an area where, okay, all the design talent lives in one area, and all of a sudden you've got, you know, locations around the world. I really feel strong about having a very global perspective. And we had Imagineers who definitely had a creative background experience, really had to now take on much, much larger scale work. And, through a lot of ingenuity and creativity, that worked well. And it was so great to actually speak with many, even through translation, to understand. We had multiple languages on the site to say, wow, how grateful it is to have an opportunity. And sometimes, unfortunately, it takes a pandemic or something where you can't travel, where you begin to trust. And I think one of the messages that really rang home to me is, how do we begin to trust each other? We don't all have to have the same background, the same education, or even the same, point of view. And it's okay for somebody to bring that other point of view. And so, one of the projects that the team had worked on, which is, we'll call, and actually, just to warn you guys, this is a very different type of architecture. Remember, it's Disney. It was at the, just real quick, I was at the Julia Morgan presentation earlier this week, and my first experience with Julia Morgan was Hearst Castle, because we didn't live too far from there. And so I said, I've kind of gone full circle, a woman architect who works on castles. So it's going to be a very different scale and tone, but I think it's also important that so much about our profession of architecture is so great, because a lot of people ask me, how did you make that transition from Gensler to Imagineering, doing these projects all over the world that are amazing scale, and I'm working with everything from musicians to story writers to ride engineers to, we have one Imagineer who has 100 patents, so it's just the whole scale, and also we do the Muppets. So it's a full range, but I believe it's that architecture profession. And again, I want to give a shout out to the AIA Los Angeles, because I felt like that's where I really learned you can take any complex problem, and architecture really does teach you how to scale anything down, and from a creative perspective. And so for me, it was actually a lot more seamless than I had ever expected. So I wanted to just kind of show, just a kind of a run through this project, Fantasy Springs. I just love the name already. But this is in Tokyo, so you can imagine going at least the last 2.5 years where we have not been able to go in person and look at it, and just the scale of the construction and the design. So you think we work with models, we work with renderings, work with ideas, but this has everything. So transport yourself into a world where you're working, where you're gonna see Neverland and Pan, where you're gonna look into an area where we're gonna start to see areas around like the rock work and the landscape and the study, and it's creating this overly immersive experience. The ideas around Rapunzel. Did I ever think studying at Cal Poly Pomona I was gonna be doing a land with Rapunzel? But I'll take it. But I mean, look at it, it's structural, it's scaffolding, it's architecture. And then all the way even to the scale of Arendelle. So if any of you have kids, you probably know what Arendelle is. It's in Frozen. But what's so great, it's fun. It's another way. It's not necessarily, sometimes it is a book report of the movie, but many times it's like, how do you take that story to a whole another level? So I have to say, I was just like so amazed with the team and those that necessarily wouldn't have had a certain opportunity to have a creative role to really drive that. And it's just absolutely, absolutely inspiring for me. So I'm just going to, really quick, I just wanted to give you, so this was some of the team. If you notice, I'm holding a stuffed animal. Her name is Lena Bell. And if you Google Duffy or Lena Bell, maybe in Tokyo or in Hong Kong, people wait in line to buy this stuffed animal, and it sells out like in seconds. So there's a whole story behind it. But it's just so fascinating. And the other thing I just loved with going around the park in Tokyo was how people dress to go to the park. So majority of the guests that go to the park in Tokyo are young women. And it's because it's sort of seen as a safe place. You can get together, it's a group of friends, everybody dresses up. So it's very different than, let's say, if you go to Walt Disney World in Orlando. So just saying. So, again, what I talked about is we've got all these cross-discipline, and, and I'm very excited, the number of women leading roles, but again, when you're looking at areas that are heavy construction or a lot of engineering, I know those are traditionally a lot of roles with men, and so I'm really proud of a lot of the team to sort of say, how do you start to train, how do you start to learn, and how do you really, again, when you start taking story-driven, you look at sort of like who is behind those stories. And a ride engineer can really have a perspective as much as an artist. So I just want to quickly tell you, and then I'm always fascinated around, again, the idea around how we start looking at robotics in the future. And so we have also a lot of live performers, but again, live performer can only do so much. So how do you complement it with the idea? And this was our Stuntronics figure that we were working on robotics. So at Disneyland, we have a figure that really flies 85 feet in the air, and many people can't even see where the human performer starts and stops, and then when the robotic performer starts and stops. So it's always just kind of pushing. So it's not to replace the human performer, but it's to complement and to add, and how we learn back and forth. And again, ideas around how do we bring characters. We talk a lot about characters and then the stories. And so again, I really believe, again, who's telling that story? What is behind it? And then how do you start to bring these characters and stories into their own scale and to their own life? And so again, we're continuing to push and to innovate, and then also, you know, we always have so many guests that start to say, you know, I want to see myself. And so I was just having a conversation with somebody earlier today, and I said, you know, my experience from a design used to be, you know, I design an office building for a client who then has another group that moves into the building, and then there's so on. In this world, we're so in touch with those who are going to use our space, to the point where I could sit there in the park and see how somebody comes out. So definitely there's areas we know we need to do a better job in terms of really creating that representation, making sure all sorts of voices are heard. But again, I think it's, again, back to in any of our companies or any of our firms or even in the small practices, having that diverse talent to start to say, because we all bring a very, very different perspective. And so I mentioned again, I have all these stories. Part of my job, you know, I always want to make sure I'm working with people that really know these stories so well. And it was my daughter who just said the other day, she goes, "Are you actually watching Frozen?" I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Are you really watching Black Panther for the 10th time?" I go, "Yeah." And so, you know, so she says to me, "So what do you actually do?" Actually, I got that question at Gensler too, but I really get it now at Walt Disney Imagineering in terms of, so sometimes what we do in terms of supporting talents and working together may not be so visible, because I'm not always 10 feet above, right, sketching, which I love that line. And sometimes it is really connecting people with different backgrounds around the world at different time zones, living on a cruise ship to actually get it done. But, you know, I was going to just share with you a brief clip that just gives you a better maybe explanation of the work I do. Oh, so I'm going to let them run it up there.
When we dream up new ideas for Disneyland, they first take shape and form in preliminary studies. These scale models, and drawings, and blueprints. These are the things that dreams are made of.
You know, so, you know, whether you're, you know, the young child looking at that experience and say, you know, am I tall enough? Do you always remember those days? Am I tall enough to go on that experience? Or, you know, being older. I've had back surgery, so there's some rides I can't go on, some projects I can't do. But the idea is to really embrace the idea of creating that inclusive culture, that we are allies for each other, right? And to recognize that stories can change. And I'm so grateful to be leading Walt Disney Imagineering. It was the only think tank that Walt Disney himself had set up. And this year we are celebrating our 70 years as Walt Disney Imagineering. And I couldn't be more prouder. And again, really want to thank AIA Los Angeles, Women in Architecture, and all the professionals that are here today, because I do think this is just, again, an amazing group. It's amazing to see how many years, I was just looking at that this has been going on. And again, we want to continue to support each other, and feel free to always reach out. I always love to make sure I'm supporting the profession in any way I can. And again, I know I'm standing between you and probably a very delicious lunch. And so again, I want to leave you with that, because it's all about the guest experience. And again, thank you so much. That's what they taught me. Oh. So, again, thank you so much, and just have a really wonderful afternoon. I know there's going to be some rich panels and presentations, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for your inspiring remarks to close our morning session. We also want to thank our speakers, panelists, virtual attendees, and audience members for your contributions this morning.
However, the day's not over for those of us here at Colburn School. We look forward to further deep dives in our afternoon workshops. But before heading out, Kristen and I have a couple of announcements.
The Women in Architecture Committee has always been a group of passionate people who collect their expertise, intellect, and joy for a common goal. Today, we would like to recognize Jen Wong and Ashley Richardson for their contributions and support over the past 3 years. Your advice to us as past chairs has been invaluable.
Similarly, we would like to share our excitement for Kristen Fermani and Monica Rodriguez as our incoming WIA chairs in 2023. We really look forward to their work next year, continuing our WIA mission. If you're interested in participating in WIA, please reach out to any of us on the stage.
You may hang out or you may leave, depending. Thank you as we figured that out. While this powerful conference is WIA's signature annual event, our work in advocacy continues beyond this day. As Mitra mentioned at the top of the morning, we could all do more to bring further awareness to Iranian women's fight for basic rights. If you are interested in contributing to this effort, please reach out to us and we will connect you with your fellow allies. And if there's something else equity-related that brings you joy, or lights a fiery rage, or simply compels you to contribute, we encourage you to bring it into the conversations today. Conversations lead to allies, and a group of allies can figure out what can be done tomorrow beyond powerful.
Thank you to those that joined us virtually this morning. We say goodbye for now and hope you might be able to join us in person next year. We will now move into some instructions for those that are attending in person for the rest of the day. We have about 40 minutes for lunch in the courtyard outside, but before you grab your food, please gather outside for our Powerful 9 group photo.
For after lunch, hopefully you remember your 2 afternoon work sessions. Our workshops are numbered 1 through 7 and are located throughout the different classrooms and spaces of Colburn. There is a workshop map in your digital program and also posted physically throughout the campus. Full disclosure, the Colburn campus is very confusing, especially for first-time visitors. Even very highly intelligent architects and designers might get a little lost, so we have your back, and don't worry about if you get lost.
So we've asked some helpful workshop leaders to be available in the courtyard to be your tour guides. So just look for the workshop number on their clipboards at around 1 o'clock for the first session to start at 1:15. I think we're running about 15 minutes behind. So, so after session 1, if you can't find the workshop on your own, it's okay. Please come back out to the courtyard and find your next leader with their clipboard. They'll get you to your next workshop on time. So it may feel a little bit like the first day of middle school out there in the courtyard. So please have patience and enjoy the energy of us being here in person in a very un-Zoom-like experience, right? Of physically moving from space to space, okay? And at this time, we want to say thank you again to our presenting and champion sponsors, Student Scholarship, Speaker, Happy Hour, and Printing sponsors, as well as Friends of Powerful and participating sponsors. And, let's get to the last slide. And a last big thank you to our AIA LA staff for your support.
After the workshops, we will not be meeting as a group again, and this is our last opportunity to thank you one last time. We hope you enjoy your deep dives in the afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you at the happy hour at Hill Street Bar and Restaurant, sponsored by AC Martin. It's only a short walk away, and I do believe that we'll get little wristbands for a complimentary drink. Enjoy your lunch and make sure to meet for a group photo before you dive in. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.